One turn is going to be deciding this, and we got to see the prize cards.
And to start things off here, the prizing looking crazy out here for Alberto. Two of those Dracloak and the Neo Upper Energy, but things will be kicking off as the final of the Lille Regional Championships begins.
Got to see Alexander going first, and in this matchup, you want to be going second. You're playing Dragapult after all, but fortunately for Alexander's side, starting off with that all-important buddy Poffin, being able to get out your Dreepy, your Duskulls, your Buddy, which you need for every single matchup.
And Dragapult EX with Dust Noir was 4 of our top 8 decks. Talk us through why this deck is so powerful.
You sit down and item lock your opponent. You can sit down and tool lock your opponent. You can spread your opponent to pieces. Make 6 prize turns. This deck is perfect for everything you want to be doing. And number one thing you can do in Pokemon if you want to win, make sure your opponent doesn't play.
Exactly, and you got that disruption late game with Iono, the draw throughout the game with the Dracloak, the middle evolution of that Dragapult line. A great way to see lots of cards, and we've seen that in the previous 2 semi-finals, how much it helped to get through those games, the consistency of the deck. And as Alexander looks through his deck to try and work out his prize cards right now, we'll be seeing a few little pieces missing, but nothing too crazy. But for Alberto, it's going to be a lot more challenging when he looks through those prize cards, as anyone who watched the World Finals just gone in Anaheim will have noticed how those Dracloaks being missing can be a massive factor in the consistency of the deck.
Both of our players are missing, either 1 or 2 Dracloaks, but it's really worse on Alberto's side. I do have to stress that Neo Upper Energy being prized, it loses a lot of the explosivity that Alberto could be having here with being able to, on 1 turn, just being able to power Dragapult. When you can't do that, sort of lose the edge.
Just the 2 Dreepy for Alexander, an attachment to the active Monkey Dory, and a pass over to Alberto. How's that hand looking? Can play a supporter now, as those going second will be able to do so. And doesn't seem like there's a huge amount in Alberto's hand. Can't quite peep all those cards, but it is an important moment. Is that a Brock Scouting? So that's a card that is different in Alberto's list. Alexander, talk through some of these differences both these players have chosen to go for.
Yeah, so Alberto's playing 1 Hilda and 2 Brock Scouting. The Brock Scouting is kind of playing a double nest ball in the early stages of the game, although also being able to grab 1 evolution Pokemon if you choose to do so. So at most stages of the game, it has legitimate use. Here with Brock Scouting, depending on how the rest of Alberto's hand look, you can either be picking something like Latias Budgie to be able to, start putting on the Ichipan lock, or be able to search up multiple Dreepy. I couldn't quite peek in Alberto's hand whether or not there were access to either that be Dreepy or Budgie, but one thing is for certain is that by doing this Brock, it's a more conservative choice compared to the Lily that was already in the hand.
So Brock Scouting on Alberto's side. What's Alexander got in place? So Alexander is playing the Hilda, but in 2 count. But in place of the other Brock Scouting, what's Alexander gone for?
So as Alexander already told us in an interview, the difference between their lists is basically, yes, Alberto running 2 Brock and 1 Hilda, but Alexander runs 3 bosses where Alberto runs 2. So in these kind of mid-game scenarios, whenever you want to start these prize trades off, playing the 3rd boss gives you the advantage in that you can be able to go Dusclops and remove, for example, 2 Dracloaks from the board. Typically in this matchup, the first one to go Dragapult EX plus boss is the eventual victor. That is why playing the 3rd boss is so much more important.
Both players will be looking to develop that Dracloak next turn. Neither of them playing Rare Candy, so they cannot accelerate to the Dragapult in 1 turn. Will take a little bit of evolving up, and it's that patience that's allowed them to get here, and all the other matches that they've played against each other, they will know they have a bit of time to get set up, so they don't need to worry so much about disruption. The one thing that's different, though, Alexander has an energy attachment on that Monkey Dory. That might be able to attack next turn.
Might be able to attack, although the Ichipan is super important here. Lily's Determination Freight, getting that Dracloak down, super important start here for Alexander. No Ichipan, you have to remember, Mike, which means that when we're looking at it, there could be Buddy Puffin for Duskull, for Budgie, and then Alexander is going to be able to be the one putting on this Ichipan lock, and then how is Alberto going to react to that, right? Whenever you're sitting with a board that's, in strength-wise, not super great, you're kind of getting closer to the point where if you can't get enough Dracloaks down, enough energy, getting to Ichipan your opponent, you're going to be such a disadvantage.
Well, Lily's determination certainly puts you in an advantage. 8 cards when you still have 6 prize cards remaining, and that's exactly what we see in Alexander's hand. Anything there to help develop this board? We'll be looking for those Dracloaks. 1 prized for Alexander. so it won't be super easy to find them, but with those Ultra Balls, able to find any Pokemon from the deck, just discarding 2 cards, and with a huge hand like that, plenty of options for what to discard.
Already does have the Budew, and you know, the ability to be recon directive in before the Ultra Ball. I really do like that option, because it means that you could potentially be drawing into one of those cards you were trying to draw, well, search for the Ultra Ball. Now, didn't get anything that, you know, Aleksander wanted to, which means that we can get to use the Ultra Ball for something like Dracloak. We do already have Budew in hand, which means that this decision is either do we grab a Lilies we want to be using on the next turn, or do we grab a Budew actually just to discard it?
So you mentioned in this mirror match, the key to winning is getting to that Dragapult EX and taking knockouts on the targets you want, whether it's with the boss's orders or a counter catcher. What other factors in this matchup should we be looking out for?
Whoever can establish the itchy pawn lock first, and we kind of already have the answer to that now. That's going to be Aleksander, but also who gets to have most Dracloaks in play and get to start using their Dusknoir line most effectively. A thing you can also be doing in this mirror match whenever you can get your Dusknoir line going is that if your opponent only has 1 Dracloak down or 1 Dracloak with energy, speaking of that, you can go ahead and see like, well, I'll just go ahead and Curse Blast that and keep using Itchy Pollen. The longer you can keep your Itchy Pollen train going, basically, and the longer you can keep this lock of setting up, getting energy in play, getting Dusknoirs up and going, the better it is.
Well, with neither of them having rare candy, targeting those singular Dracloak is going to be key. But for Aleksander, he has established 2 Dracloak at this stage. And with that energy on the Munkidori, we'll be putting the Budew down just before retreating, and we'll be getting that Itchy Pollen lock that you mentioned. No items will be available for Alberto, and with that attachment, not only ahead with the Itchy Pollen and the evolutions, but also with the attachments.
I'm only going to say it here, Mike, we do need some help on Alberto's side. The hand does contain Dracloak as far as I can see, but not much more than that. Dracloak, Lille's Determination, probably going to go look at being like, we need to get energy or Latias plus Budew and Duskull to start setting up and try to compete against Aleksander's board. If Aleksander continues to, you know, solidify the advantage board-wise that he already has by getting something like Luminous for the Munkidori, we can see this game get out of Alberto's grasp really quickly.
You see, not evolving the active Duskull, wanting to keep it a basic Pokemon and with a single retreat, just in case off the back of this Lille's Determination can find a way to get a Latias maybe, or an energy to retreat. And that's another factor in the matchup. We have these low HP EXs like Latias EX, Pheasantipity EX, and even that Blood Moon can sometimes be forced into play if you start it. How do they affect the matchup?
You do really want to keep them out of play. Latias, Pheasantipity, they both have 210 HP, which are, you know, kind of squishy Pokemon in this case. When we're talking Halucha can be putting 10 damage on, and then suddenly it's only 200 left. Well, Phantom Dive takes care of that. Or you can, during multiple turns, be able to place your Phantom Dive damage onto either Pheasantipity or onto, you know, Latias as well, and then Dusknoir's going to take it away.
And we see the first recon directive for Alberto in the final here, having an amazing Swiss run. We got to see him in day 1 with one of the most phenomenal turns, taking out a Gardevoir all in 1 turn, 6 prize cards. It won't be the case here in this matchup, as the stability of both these decks really makes it hard to take a lot of prize cards in one, as we see Aleksander starting to draw more cards. And we mentioned about that advantage. There is a lone Dracloak in play with a singular energy on it. If Aleksander this turn is able to take that out, that will put Alberto so far back in the matchup.
We can always talk about what Aleksander would consider, you know, the best hand possible. What even could happen here is if you go Dusclops 50 onto their cloak, evolve into Dragapult, attaches that second energy, both the Duskull and the active and their cloak are gone. And we do see the 50 there. Do we see Boss's orders and energy? There's energy.
Wow. Is this the turn?
Boss's orders.
Boss's orders going to be able to take out the complete line there. Hawlucha onto both of them too. I think that might be putting him in range for the full turn here. Whoa. With the Dragapult. He's going to be winning this turn. Phantom Dive takes out the active, 40 on the Duskull remaining, 20 on the Dreepy, and Aleksander wins so early in this first game.
Wipe the board, Mike. Wipe it off. Aleksander Rutowicz showing us, well, if my opponent is not setting up perfectly, Dusclops, Hawlucha, getting all my Dragapult pieces, Oh, that's how you do it.
We were talking about how to slow down Alberto, but it turns out you can win the game there and then. Aleksander having a great start, going first with that buddy poffin, able to establish the Dreepy. Meanwhile, Alberto a little bit slow considering he went second, matching the quality of Aleksander's turn, but by being one turn ahead, Aleksander was able to evolve up so much quicker.
Yeah, and getting double Dracloak turn 2 was really just the turning point of this match. And then at later stages, you know, you got to see Alberto one Dracloak. No Itchy Pollen. You have to remember, Mike, the difference of these two boards was Itchy Pollen, Duskull, multiple Dracloaks, and yeah, we get to see the finishing point here with Dusclops onto the Dreepy, Boss's Orders, Evolution, Attach, Hawlucha, perfect maps once more.
Yeah, I think there was even damage to spare. There was only 40 HP left on the Duskull, 10 on the Dreepy, so well within range, and that just shows you how important it is to establish that board nice and wide, get loads of Dracloaks in play, and of course we looked at those prize cards being rough for Alberto, but it really didn't make that much of a difference in the grand scheme of things because he needed more Dreepies, he needed to establish more on his bench, needed the Itchy Pollen to try and slow down his opponent, but Aleksander, what a start.
Yeah, it was pressing those two Dracloaks that was really, you know, detrimental in this game. On top, like the new upper energy in the phases of the game we actually got to didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. But as Alberto, you're thinking, there's a good question in this matchup. Do you wish to go first and kind of take a little bet on, can I draw Buddy Puffin to open the game, or do you want to go second and get to actually play a supporter like Brox? Pretty certain that Alberto's going to say, I'm going to go second. It's a more consistent option considering you're playing 4 Buddy Puffin, you're playing 4 Ultra Ball, you're playing 2 Brox Scouting, and you're playing your latest determination. Probably, you know, a lot better just go ahead and say, I'm going to take the consistent option, hope that game 1 doesn't repeat itself, and then we'll take it from there.
Well, if you're able to get that Itchy Pollen off on your first attacking turn, you can really slow down your opponent's setup. You know, if you've got a Lily's Determination into a bunch of cards that they're all items, you can't really help set up your board too much. So second normally is favorable, but in this case... I don't
see any draw supporters here from Alberto. So the top decks coming into his turn is going to be super important here. Getting game 2 out of finals underway.
Wow, here we go. There's the prize cards for both these players. Again, nothing too crazy. A little bit of the consistency might be gone, but Aleksander going first finds the Buddy Poffin once again. Badu in the active for both players, and Aleksander will be able to establish some of those Dreepy.
What a perfect start from Aleksander. Starting Badu, nice. Maneuverability, check. Mobility, with that too. But also just getting Buddy Puffin, you can get the double Dreepy and start your setup after Cloak. And what I really want to scout into his hand is, do we have Cloaks? Do we have Ultra Balls? Do we potentially have, well, Hilda's prized one of them at the very least, but do we have options to search up more Dracloak and energy to build the perfect board once again?
I think I peeped in energy, so we'll have an attachment for turn. There's all these little factors that are important in every single turn. Getting your evolutions through, getting the attachments in play, and trying to slow down your opponent. And with both players starting Badu, they're certainly going to slow each other down. But if Aleksander is able to use a bunch of these items before the Badu from Alberto, he's going to be able to set up in a great way. And once the Dracloaks are on board, you can draw lots of cards, you can see your way through the deck, and you don't necessarily need those items at that stage.
And my eye spies 1 Dreepy, a Dracloak, and an energy in the hand. So Aleksander is opening up with the perfect opening. On top of that, having a supporter ready for next turn, it's as yeah, Aleksander's just calling cards he wants to have in his hand, which is, I mean, if you want to try and win the regionals finals, that's what you want to do.
And there's a Dracloak for next turn, the attachment in place. Alberto, how's your hand looking? It was a little bit slow last game, but now you're going to be trying to establish the board. A few Ultra Balls in there, not ideal early on because you have to discard important resources, but we'll have to use some of that to try and build up a board here.
But I'm really sorry here, Mike. I still do not see any draw supporters. I don't see any Lily's Determination. I don't see any Iono. I don't even see a Brock.
This could be a pretty quick game if that's the that's the case, as the Duskull's in play, the Dreepy's in play, and Alberto not feeling so confident with this. I think discarding 2 Countercatcher there, and that's taking away options for later on. There's only 3 in Alberto's deck.
And that's the typical count you see in every single Dragon Ball Dusknoir deck. Triple Countercatcher, which is all right. Maybe sometimes you'd only be needing to play 1 Countercatcher during the entirety of the game. But here, Alberto is in survival mode already. And you might be saying, well, Jesper, it's only turn 1. Why is it in survival mode? Do you see the board that Aleksander is already presenting? The options in hand? everything is just going to come. It's going to snowball towards the end of the game. Alberto looks like he has to play double Ultra Ball to be able to get, first of all, 3P, but then their Cloak for next turn, and hope that their Cloak next turn plus the top deck for draw of turn gets him there.
Look at the discards as well. Boss's Orders and Professor Turo's Scenario. These are not the cards you want to be discarding, but needs to get the Dracloak now because of the fact the item lock's coming through next turn. So for Alberto, has a Dreepy and a Dracloak to work with, which is not a lot facing down what Alexander has.
And I mean, it just shows the effort of Alberto's trying to do. Like, he has faced adversity before. We saw this in previous stream games, but I think it's, you know, by far the weakest opening we've seen of Alberto. One card left in hand.
And Alexander knows exactly what that card is. It's that Dracloak. He's just got off the Ultra Ball. So item lock in play now. Badu with Itchy Pollen means Alexander cannot play items this turn. And so has the Dracloak naturally in hand. And is that an energy as well? All these energies are so key. Everything about Alexander's first few turns here is key to getting him ahead. And there is potential for a similar scenario to game one.
I see Luminous Energy. If Alexander has a boss potentially, could it be attached into that Cloak and actually use the Dragon Headbutt to knock out? But we don't see that quite. Do you see an Iono? I don't. No, there's no way Italy's going to play that.
I mean, if he finds Dusclops, he can win this turn.
Nah, certainly not. But you don't need to do that, Mike. Alberto's sitting on one singular card, right? You don't have to stress it this turn. You can sit back, Itchy Pollen, and then potentially you can go for it next turn, perhaps. If you use Iono and you whiff, what would then happen?
He's going to go for the Iono, getting aggressive, trying to find the next important card. That singular card hand from Alberto was a Dracloak, but you're giving Alberto so many more cards here. But it is possible for Alexander to win out of this hand. If there's a Dusclops, he wins this turn. Is it there? No, I don't think it is.
No, I see purple, but it's not Dusclops. And this just reminds me a bit of, for the old heads out there, the 2014 Pokemon Worlds Finals, where Igor Costa end his opponent out of a miserable hand. In this case, N being replaced with Iono, and Alexander being replaced, well, Igor being replaced with Alexander in this case. And is this what Alberto needs to come back into this?
Taking the knockout on the active Badu, so getting aggressive at this stage. Alexander really wants this win here in Lille. As Alberto, still on the back foot, only has a singular Pokemon in play with that energy attachment, and knowing there's no rare candies, that's only ever going to be a Dracloak.
Not only what does he want the win, he wants it fast, Mike, and it opens up a lot of things here for Alberto. You can evolve into Dracloak. You can go ahead and use Flip the Script to set your board up. You know, it's a very aggressive line from Alexander, and I really want to be able to see, is this going to bite him, or is it actually going to be paying off?
I mean, we say about him giving Alberto more cards, but it also gave Alexander more cards. Look, he's now got 2 Duskull and a 3rd Dreepy in play, so it's helped him set up more, and perhaps he feels like if he goes ahead and stays ahead, he'll be in a great position, and it's going to be forcing a lot for Alberto. No item lock, so is able to use that Buddy Buddy Poffin.
Yeah, and thereby foregoing the item lock. I'm not sure if I'm sold on that idea, but at the very least, we see just like the Terra box match that Alberto had. Has to come back, has to stabilize, and has to try and find a way where he can get room to essentially just breathe, right? And if we can get that, we've seen it previously from Alberto. If you're then able to set up these combo-wombo turns, you would then be able to claw back. But yeah, if Alexander gets a few more pieces, Dusclops, Dracloak, Dragapult itself, yeah, this looks pretty difficult.
Alexander sitting very far ahead, got aggressive. But there's a lot now for Alberto to do. Even if he evolves that Dreepy up, he knows that Alexander only needs a few cards in combination to be able to take it out. And if you keep locking your opponent out of evolutions like Dracloak, they're just going to be sat there trying to evolve multiple Dreepies at once, and then just not available.
And the worst part about it here, regardless of if Alexander goes ahead and draws Dragapult DX, Dusclops, even if Alberto gets a Dracloak, which Alberto needs. Wait a minute, Mike. I don't think we do have a Dracloak here. We have to retreat into Badu, but I don't see Dracloak.
No, there's a Duskull there. That's the only Pokemon in the hand. So it's actually going to be item locking without an evolution. Alberto reestablishes item lock, but for Alexander, if there's a Dragapult in hand, he could be hugely far ahead, and he's going to be able to do a recon directive to start things off. And there's a Dragapult in that hand.
Mike, you know, already here we can get to start to set up these 3Ps for knockouts, right? You can put 30 in each of them, and then regardless of if they evolve into the Drag Cloaks, you can be able to take them out next turn. We have to stress, Alberto does not play Rare Candy in his deck. So, Mike, you know, that Dragapult, this might be it.
Well, he put the Dragapult on the bottom of the deck with the Recon Directive. Is there one in hand already?
I think there's a Hilda.
I mean, this is incredible for Aleksander, just so far ahead, establishing the board.
Mike.
There's one already in hand, and this is the reason why that Iono being played is just allowed Aleksander to see more cards. His board state was amazing. The only thing he needed was to keep progressing it, and that's exactly what has happened. There's the evolution. Dragapult on the active. Boss's orders onto the Dreepy. He's going to be taking a huge knockout at this stage. Alberto with a mountain to climb.
A mountain to climb seems like an understatement of the ages here, Mike. Looking at it, taking out the only energy in play. Can even take out the Budgie on the bench. Can even put something like 10 on the Festantipity, 20 on the Dreepy, or just set up the Dreepy fully for next turn without the need of any Dustclops shenanigans or whatnot.
Taking out the Budu, 30 damage on the Dreepy. Alberto, you have a mammoth of a task here to take on. With no rare candy, we have at least 2 turns before Alberto is able to start attacking with Dragapult. Meanwhile, Aleksander has his Dragapult established, has the draw engine behind it, has Duskulls even ready to evolve, so has everything there available to go ahead. Alberto, how are you going to pull back from this?
Mike, I have sounded like a non-believer multiple times. Alberto has, you know, really impressed me multiple times, but I think in this position, when you're that far ahead as Aleksander is, we're looking at it, 3 prizes. It can even be taken next turn by something, you know, like Dustclops onto the Festantipity and another boss's orders, right? With Aleksander stressing that he plays 3 versus Alberto's 2. Buddy popping for 2 GP. It's going to take 2 turns, which means that Aleksander's going to be down to either 2, 1 prize before Alberto even gets a singular Phantom Dive in.
And with that 3 damage on the Dreepy in the active spot, even if it evolves into a Drakloak, it's in range, but an Iono will help out a little bit here for Alberto. Is likely going to need to do some stalling to even think about coming back into this game, but he discarded 2 counter catchers at the beginning of this game.
Yeah, so Mike, you're not going to be able to stall without any counter catchers whenever you're playing Iono. And speaking of that, 3 out of 5 options of Gust are gone. Boss and 2 counter catcher. There's only 1 counter catcher and 1 boss's orders left. Can't play boss's orders because we played Iono already. And looking at the hand, I don't see anything here, Mike, that we actually can use for something. Festantipity can use flip the script, draw 3 cards.
Well, you can see a Drakloak as well. But the counter catcher, the lone counter catcher that's left in the deck, as we say, is actually in the prize cards. So
you're right about that. Even worse. And speaking of it, when you're looking at it, yes, we can Ultra Ball for a Drakloak, but that is going to meet its certain doom because of the Phantom Dive.
So Alberto has no counter catchers left. 2 have been discarded, 1 in the prize cards. He has no Drakloaks in play. Now we'll have 1, but it's going to take some time to get that into Dragapult. Aleksander is on his victory lap at this stage. After having such a quick, successful game 1, has motored into the lead in game 2. Now Alberto is really going to be wondering, what can he even do at this stage to come back in?
This looks like a game where if we were in a foot race, Aleksander could start running backwards and still win it. With the way we're only going to be able to see 1 Drakloak from Alberto, ladies and gentlemen, I have to stress that that is going to be knocked out next turn. That is for sure. And with no counter catcher, we're not going to be able to avoid that.
Well, Alberto came top 8 at Lille 2 years ago, top 4 at Lille just last year, is in the final of Lille this year, trying to repeat his Gdansk regional championship win last time. But for Aleksander, he is staring down moments away from an opportunity to become his first time regional champion in the Masters division. It's all over to Aleksander now. We'll be able to just
He has 1
swing.
Dustclops. We need 2 Dustclops for the win here, Mike.
Well, not in that hand from the Recon Directive. Even a Night Stretcher would do. And so many options, even if he doesn't win this turn in such a strong position. And you've got to imagine the nerves right now Aleksander's going to be feeling, even though it feels so safe. You're always going to be feeling nervous as a top player when you're staring down your first regional win.
And here's Lille's determination. Do we get a Night Stretcher? Do we get the second Dusclops? Being able to go ahead and Dusclops wherever on the bench that isn't Fescendipity, we don't care anymore, Alexander. Just show us what you're going to be hitting off this Lille's determination.
6 cards, 1 option, another Dusclops or a Night Stretcher, and Alexander will become your Lille regional champion. Is it going to be happening? Let's see what's in those cards. Not quite. It's not quite there. It's Ultra Ball. There's an Ultra Ball. That means he can do this turn. Ultra Ball for that Dusclops. Alexander, do you see it right now? Ultra Ball going into the deck. And if he finds that Dusclops right now, it's going to be game. Alexander wins Lille.
What a match. Congratulations, Aleksander Rutowicz. 1 week before you get home and defend your home turf, you might as well just take the crown of Lille Regional Champion.